Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast powered by Believe Network. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, it is that time of the year where we go and we do our division previews. Last week we did the Pacific, and now we are on to the Central.
This was the best division in hockey last year. You had the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets, who had the best season in the history of their reiteration since the old Coyotes moved to Winnipeg. We had the Stars and Avalanche, who have been bona fide Stanley Cup contenders for much of the last 5 years. The Wild had a nice bounce-back season after missing the playoffs the year before. Prior to Kaprizov getting hurt in January, you could have made an argument he was in the Hart Trophy conversation, how good a season he was having. And the St. Louis Blues, realizing that the walls were closing in, made a gutsy decision to change coaches in season. And upon Jim Montgomery's arrival, they became the best team in hockey. That's not an exaggeration. From the end of February, when the Four Nations face-off ended, to the end of the regular season, the Blues had the best points percentage of any team in the NHL. They largely did it through elite defense and a strong power play. We all are relatively interested in the Utah Mammoth going into this season as being a team that could make some steps towards being a playoff team, if not making the playoffs outright. The JJ Peterka trade is something we will definitely address. And then you have the redheaded stepchildren and the Predators and the Blackhawks at the bottom of this division, which are we were talking about it before we started recording, but Nashville really misevaluated where they were, both in terms of their window of contention. And that's not a knock on their guys, and we'll get to them relatively early because we're going in reverse order from last year. And then you have the Blackhawks, who are in a rebuild, but the only young forward they have is Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. But their defense is a lot of young guys and then some holdovers. You get that Spencer Knight trade last year. So the Blackhawks are very obviously playing for floor. And that's
my
where
favorite future Ranger, Alex Vlasic. You cannot forget about him.
Alex Vlasic is probably the prospect other than Bedard who has demonstrated the most at the NHL level and shown an ability that even in pretty adverse situations to be effective. And that's where we'll start. We'll start with the Blackhawks, who are 4 years into this at this point, where 2021 is the last year Kane and Taves are Taves, and then they trade Kane subsequently the year and a half later. But by and large, the Blackhawks have tried to do the legwork of the rebuild. They've stunk. Outright, objectively stunk. They did it on purpose. They knew the Bedard draft was coming. They tore it down to the studs as bare bones as they could. They have made subtle attempts to surround him with decent players, guys like Taylor Hall. Obviously, that didn't end up working out. They traded him anyway. They tried Teuvo Teravainen, who kind of just looks old at this point.
Yep.
They've tried things like Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Foligno. I get what Kyle Davidson is trying to do, but at a certain point, it falls on deaf ears. You got to show signs of progress. And I think the first real inflection point for me with the Blackhawks was those random 2 weeks last year where the talking heads on both the ESPN and TNT panels were just shitting on Connor Bedard for no reason. He was the only guy on that team with a pulse last year. And you have people like Paul Bissonnette saying, well, if Bedard plays like this, the Blackhawks are never going to win anything. I don't know, man. Do you see what the rest of the lineup looks like?
Yeah.
Do you see who he's playing with? You have him playing with Ryan Donato, who had the year of his life last year, like 25 goals, and you're getting on Bedard for his defense. That's the difference between the Blackhawks being the worst team in the NHL and a playoff team, is Connor Bedard trying a little bit harder on the forecheck and defense. And then Subban did the same thing a week later. Messier doing the same thing a week later. And look, I know we have gotten to a point where the first overall pick has a certain baseline expectation. The days of the Niall Yakupovs of the world are basically over, where even if you get drafted first overall, you're going to hang around for 10 years. And look, Bedard has shown a lot more than guys like Lafreniere. He's shown more than, I would say, Owen Power. But there's this really weird perception that he's not living up to expectations. What would you like him to do? Look at his most common line mates. Look at the defensive situation. Look at the coaching situation. And tell me you expect anything more than 60 to 70 points of what is effectively empty calorie offense, because the team's not going to win. It doesn't matter how good he is. You could put McDavid on this team by himself, and it probably doesn't make that much more of a difference. This is a very poor hockey team. They need more talent, and they have surrounded Connor Bedard with a bunch of second, third, and fourth liners. There is no 1B to Bedard's 1A.
No, think of it this way. They're multiple years into a rebuild, and Daily Faceoff right now has Connor Bedard's line mates as Ryan Donato and Andrei Burakovsky.
Yeah.
That's your top line.
And 3-4 years in.
Multiple years of being ass. You did it on purpose, right? You stunk and you got all those draft picks and you acquire all these young guys. Sure, multiple years in now, Connor Bedard needs someone to, like a
Will Smith,
Celebrini, Will Smith, type of 1-2 punch, and they don't have it. And by the way, Daily Faceoff is somebody called Landon Slaggart on the fourth line, which is be a pro, create a name. This is not a real human. Obviously I'm joking around. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Ilya Mikheyev's not moving you. Mikheyev and Jason Dickinson.
Come on. I understand tanking is harder than it sounds.
Yes.
Losing simply to acquire draft picks is a good strategy in theory when you can, when you have players and assets at your disposal.
And you have time. You have time when you first start.
And you have time that can, that you can turn into tangible assets that you can use in a year or two from now. Drafting a lot of these young guys is great, and the Blackhawks have a good pipeline. But how many years into this rebuild are you? And we're still thinking about a pipeline down the line for them. Again, rebuilds are good to think about, and when they work, you can see how well they do. But the Chicago Blackhawks right now are a great example of this is what happens when a rebuild is stuck in the mud.
Yep.
And the thing about this team too is they don't have a 29-year-old forward that is going to demand, a first-round pick in return, or a top quality prospect.
They don't have anything to sell.
They don't. No, they have nothing to sell, and therein lies the problem. Yeah, you can acquire.
They turned Seth Jones into Spencer Knight. You get some credit for that. Spencer Knight, in theory, is going to be decent and is a massive step up from where they've been in the goalie ladder the last couple of years. But there's only so much, and Spencer Knight has a really good amateur pedigree. He has shown occasional flashes at the NHL level prior to this upcoming season, but until you see it, I'm going to be skeptical that any goalie can thrive in this Blackhawks environment. The Blackhawks are going to try and integrate 2 prospect defensemen this upcoming year. We've mentioned Alex Vlasic. Still not a good defense. You still don't know what you're getting by and large, and as good as Spencer Knight should be, environment matters a lot.
Yeah,
and
if you walk around Chicago, or even if you go to the ESPN studios or the TNT studios or what have you, and you show,
we're gonna play who we play for.
Yeah, it's like okay, no. It's like, okay, can you name me the Blackhawks blue line? Okay,
well, no, because Mark Messier still can't pronounce Lafreniere's name correctly.
Okay, well, Alex Vlasic is probably the most famous one. Maybe Connor Murphy. Sure, you're telling me people know who Sam Rinzel is. You're telling me people know who Wyatt Kaiser is. Maybe people know who Levchinov is. You're telling me people know Ethan Del Mastro. If you
Del Mastro sounds like a guy who makes a mean sandwich.
If you get someone correctly saying the words Ethan Del Mastro, they need genuine help. I can't say this jokingly, but this blue line is basically a bunch of question marks. Alex Vlasic is the best player on that blue line by a light year and a half. That's clearly somebody that's going to be a top 2, top 4 talent on this team for years to come. And maybe they trade him, who knows, but he's a really good defenseman. Everybody else is who is this? Who could they be? Who are they right now? And what are they going to be? And, by year 4 or 5 or whatever of this rebuild, you gotta
have deliverables.
You would like to see at least some of those questions answered, but yet we have one, which is better than nothing, I guess. Alex Vlasic is a really good player that I would love to have on the Rangers, but everything else after that, it's you can go to NHL, simulate 30 years, have these creative players, and they hold as much credence as the guys currently on the Chicago Blackhawks because no one knows who they are and no one knows who they could be.
The whole point of a rebuild is that eventually you're going to have upside. The Blackhawks have no upside baked into this roster. Like, even if you think Bedard bounces back from what was a slightly subpar season compared to his rookie year, what's a better Bedard season look like playing with Ryan Donato and Andrei Burakovsky? 80 points as opposed to 70? Okay. They win 2 more games. Okay. Where are you in your process? You need upside. And like, we'll talk about Utah in a little bit. Utah is also very unproven as far as can they deliver.
Sure.
But they have 4 or 5 young guys who, if at least 1 or 2 of them pop off as opposed to just banking on one guy, you have more room. You have more upside. You have more potential. You have more potential energy to capitalize on. Whereas the Blackhawks, Bedard, Spencer Knight, Vlasic, that's really it. Like you had mentioned, they got the 2 prospect defensemen who maybe 1 or 2 of them takes a step, but you're still banking on defense. You're banking on your defense and your goaltending to win you games in today's league.
And I don't mean to cut you off again at all. Maybe I'll give it back to you in a second. But at least I will give Chicago credit for this. We always harp on teams like the Rangers doing this all the time, where you would rather play somebody who is young and might be bad, as opposed to somebody that is older that is bad.
Yeah.
For Chicago, I'll give them a lot of credit for that. It's like, okay, well, at least they're playing the young guys and just seeing what happens, as opposed to signing Cody Ceci, that ludicrous contract that LA gave him. And just tell him to go out there and try his best, right? Like, at least Chicago's like, okay, well, we drafted all y'all. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. The Blackhawks over under this year, I want to say, is in the 70. It's 64.5. Last year, they came in at 61. 64 shouldn't be that hard. That's 32 wins out of 80 at 82 games. 32 out of 82 does not seem that hard, especially considering if you just want to give Spencer Knight a league average goaltending season, it feels like they should be able to do that. But at the same time, we just spent the previous 8.5 minutes saying, I have no idea who's on this team, and I don't know what to expect from any of them. So logic would tell you they probably go over their number just based on the fact they've been so miserable for so long. They're probably due for a decent season. But looking at this roster, I don't really see a ton of upside. But then again, how hard is it to win 32 games in the NHL? Don't ask the Blackhawks. It's been a while since they've won more than 32 games, but moving along to the next team up is Nashville, who is frankly one of the more interesting case studies we've ever seen in the contemporary NHL, because coaching and general managing, obviously not a word, but I'm making it one now, are 2 fundamentally different.
Hear that, Merriam-Webster? Get on it. We're adding it.
They are 2 fundamentally different things. It's why we don't have that as one job anymore. Back in the day, that was one job. The coach would pick the players that would go onto the team, and you could understand how that eventually becomes an issue. If a coach is picking the guys who go on the team, he's always going to be interested in his own self-interest. He's going to be picking guys who are safe, who are bankable, who can get to a certain minimum threshold so you can maintain and consolidate power for an extended period of time. Now, the ideal outcome, the ideal structure in the contemporary NHL is you have alignment between your coach and your general manager, that they're on the same timelines, that the general manager picked the coach understands and believes in the general manager's philosophy, and they can execute it together. But you think about the last 2 years in Nashville, where 2 years ago, they're a nice surprise. They go to the playoffs. They lose to Vancouver in 7 games, very low scoring series. They arguably should have beaten Vancouver in that first round series. But you feel like you're in that boat with teams like Minnesota, Winnipeg, where you make the playoffs, you get a good draw, maybe you go through to the second round, maybe even a third round, but very defined ceiling, not a very high ceiling team. You have a few bankable veterans in Zararis, Forsberg, and Roman Josi, excuse me, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah. You have your 3 bankable guys, and around them you have guys like Colton Sissons, Victor Arvidsson, etc. And you're not bad, but you're not good. And Barry Trotz says, okay, we need to do something here. We need to show some conviction. And this is I will say, sensitive market where if the team is not good, people will not come. And when you have that in the back of your mind, and you're coming off of a season where you overachieved, I can understand the inclination of going to get Marchessault, going to get Stamkos, going to get Brady Shea, and saying, okay, we're going to augment our three franchise guys, Forsberg, Yossi, and Saros, and say, we got you help. Let's get to the playoffs again. Let's see if we can sneak to a conference finals before Stamkos, Marchessault fall off a cliff. And last year goes about as poorly as it possibly can. I mean, we think about that game they played against the Rangers in March where the Rangers cooked them and they looked terrible. And this is a Rangers team that had basically phoned it in for 3.5 months and they made Nashville look bad. So I think that's a real testament to just how hard Nashville was phoning it in down the backstretch of last year. And I know everybody likes to talk about, well, the year before they were going to Vegas and they canceled the U2 concert and they rallied the team. Okay. I know everybody likes Barry Trotz. I know he's Pierre LeBrun's first call every time he wants to write a story. The Predators are a very poorly constructed team. The players just fundamentally do not fit with each other. You heard Jonathan Marchessault going on the record and being like, I have no idea what we are doing. This is not a well-run hockey team. Very openly lobbying, hey, can I go back to Vegas after winning a Conn Smythe 2 years ago, 40 goals 2 years ago, getting to Nashville, looking around and saying, what the hell's going on here? That team should not be that bad, but alas.
By the way, I'm on the Wikipedia page for the list of Predators head coaches right now. So yeah, Barry, and that they have, name how long they were, how long they coached and the records and all that. And then they also have a column for achievements. Barry Trotz, funny enough, doesn't have anything there. Peter Laviolette's achievement is they won the President's Trophy in 2017-18. John Hines is blank, but
they made a Stanley Cup final.
It's blank. I don't know what to tell you. It's blank. And the Andrew Burnett one is the funniest one because under the achievements, it is a link to an article, and it's quote, is a good young coach. That's it. That's the achievement listed. I love that, like, here it doesn't list, they made the final, whatever, but they do list that Andrew Burnett is a good young coach. I just thought that was really funny.
They're in a weird spot because they're pot committed now. Like I remember talking to you about it at the game when they were playing Nashville and saying, what did they get for Askarov? And you saying not enough. There's a world where they trade Saros' expiring contract. They don't put chips in on Stamkos and Marchessault, and they start orienting the team around the Askarov age cohort. And granted, that's a lot easier to say when I'm in my position here as a prognosticator and not somebody who's going to have to put a team together around Askarov, because Nashville is a pretty old team before they signed the unction in free agency last year. So you think about it from that perspective. What's the path look like for Nashville? What's the best case for Nashville? You come in as one of the two wild cards and you get obliterated by Vegas, Dallas, Colorado in the first round. That even if that's your best case, and like, sure, you get your 2 home playoff games. It's a nice, okay, they bounced back. How do you get out of this? Because Stamkos is under contract for 6 more years. Marchessault 6 more years. Brady Shea 5 more years, 6 more years. It's going to be a long time before Nashville has flexibility. And look, this cap's going to go up.
And the contracts are really untradeable too. There's no one that's going to want those contracts either.
Especially because we can't double retain anymore as part of the new CBA. So yeah, there's a world where you could have convinced me a good team would have taken Marchessault at like 2.25 because Nashville would have retained half and then someone else would have retained half. Jonathan Marchessault at 2.5, $3 million, sure.
Steal for sure.
Marchessault at 5, 4.5. At 32,
the numbers aren't as bad, especially even this year. It's not as bad as it was when they first signed the contract. It's only going to get better because of how the cap is ballooning. But even then, and those contracts will sort of become sort of eatable. With teams having all this space and they got to use it somehow, and maybe a team like San Jose might take him or whatever. But like. The contracts are ludicrous, and Barry Trotz kind of played it like he's playing NHL, be a GM, where he went to the list of free agents.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Andrew. It hasn't been called be a GM since the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3.
Franchise mode.
Franchise mode. They got rid of the 3 cell phones function where you could be walking around with the 3 phones.
Yeah. Well, I'm chairman of the unction because I've been I played NHL since 2004. Like I've been around, and that is where my be a GM tag comes from, and you will take it from my cold dead hands, Nick. Okay. But he's playing like it's franchise mode, where he is going to the list of free agents, he's sorting at the top of overall and just signing whomstever to the biggest contracts ever. And it doesn't matter because it's a video game and who cares? Like, that's kind of how we assembled the roster. And that's not how you're supposed to do things in reality. And Steven, like we talked, I mentioned this, a while ago when we were talking about this when it first happened, but like when Tampa Bay has their franchise player, their franchise captain, someone that's been around their team for, decade plus and has won Stanley Cups with them and is beloved by the organization and the
future Hall of Famer, jersey retired, all the bells and whistles.
Right, exactly. And Tampa Bay said, actually,
we'll take Gensel.
We will walk away from you because we don't think you're good enough anymore. That should have sounded alarm bells in every other general manager's ears immediately. Why is the team that loves him so much, is going to be, a Hall of Famer for all that, letting him go for free? I would have to think that a lot of people did have their alarm bells go off, but one person slept through them. He snoozed them. Barry Trotz. And lo and behold, this is what happens.
They're in as unfortunate and like miserable a position you could be in. It's not even like you're Boston, where at least your team sucks, but your three core guys are all relatively young. Nashville's core guys are old. Like, it'd be one thing if Forsberg, Yossi, and Zararis were in their mid to late 20s, like Pasta, Swayman, and McAvoy. Okay, it's going to suck for 2 years, but at least 2 years from now, you should be able to augment and supplement those guys with a decent supporting cast. 2 years from now, Yossi, Zararis, and Forsberg are going to be like 35, and you're not going to have a path out of this without tearing it down all the way. And like we had said before, it's going to be hard to move those contracts. It's going to be hard to create liquidity just to stink. They're going to have too much talent to pick in the top 5 more likely than not. And if you're picking 7 through 12, you're basically rolling the dice. And there's a world where I could see Barry Trotz just continuing to leverage them further and further into the current group, just because he feels an obligation to make them competitive after doling out all of this money. But again, this is the danger of free agency. You can convince yourself of a lot of things when the players are actually sitting there across from you. Yeah, we can get Stamkos to work. He's going to play the wing opposite Forsberg. It's going to be fine. And look, Forsberg's still really good. Forsberg had a 50-goal season 3 years ago. This is still a really good player. Roman Josi, when he's healthy, is a Norris caliber defenseman. You
know what this is? The Nashville Predators they are a phenomenal hockey ultimate team roster. Yeah. They're great. Like if you,
I thought you were going to make a joke about like the Nets with Garnett and Paul Pierce.
Yeah, well, not quite. Like they're not that like old and washed, but they, if they're here for a couple more years, they might be. But this is a great, like a roster that you pull the
Lakers
cards
with
for.
Dwight Howard and Steve Nash.
Who's stopping them now? The Sports Illustrated cover. It's like, themselves.
Father Time.
Yeah, time, themselves, other teams. There's a lot that's gonna get in their way.
Okay, after Nashville, we get to the first interesting team in this alignment, and that's the Utah Mammoth, who overachieved their over-under last year. Their over-under last year was 88.5. They came in at 89. Their over-under this upcoming season is 93.5, which is implying that the odds makers think this could be a playoff team. 96 points was the last team in last year. That was the Blues. I think there's a world where if 2 or 3 of these young guys, whether that's Dylan Gunther, Logan Cooley, JJ Peterka, if any of those guys pop, if Kara Vejmelka takes another step as far as going from a top 15 goalie to maybe a top 10 goalie, I think there's plenty of room there. Their defense is very high floor, low ceiling. I think beyond Sergachev, it's a lot of 4th, 5th, and 6th defensemen who, if the forwards are brought in on defense, you can get by with. But there's enough here to convince yourself they can make a step. And they've been slowly but surely building up. They had the Sergachev Marino summer 2 years ago. They traded for Peterka this summer. This is a team that has played it agonizingly slow. Bill Armstrong got this job 4 or 5 years ago, and he has very deliberately accumulated as many draft picks as possible. This is a team that, I know they traded for Peterka, but this is a team that has the liquidity and the assets where if one of those big unrestricted free agents gets to January of next year, this is a team that can push chips in on someone like that. This is a team that can be very active in the restricted free agent market. And the implication, of course, as a team like Utah, who isn't going to be able to get great meetings on the first day of free agency, if you get these guys in the room and you can say, hey, you can be the face of this team along with Clayton Keller. We're going to get a new arena built here in the next couple of years. This is a team on the upswing. You want to be a part of this now. So 2 or 3 years from now, when we're ready to compete for Stanley Cups, you have been here and you know what it's going to take. Yes, that's the elevator pitch. That is the only positive way of looking at this. There's a world where all of these young guys don't pan out, where Logan Cooley is just a 50-point guy, where JJ Peterka is an empty calorie, 15, 20 goal guy, doesn't really drive possession. But Utah's put themselves in a position where at least they have young guys to gamble on, unlike the Blackhawks, who have a lot of guys, but not a lot of them have like a big range of outcomes. Chicago's range of outcomes is very small. Utah could be a 100-point team this year if everything breaks right for them.
Well, that's why I do think we're going to see a lot of what we saw last year, where there's going to be 5 teams in the Central that make the playoffs, and they're all, and Utah was close. Like, they were 7 points away from St. Louis in that spot. Like, they were knocking on the door until the very end. Like, and then you have the Pacific, where there's 3 teams, and then everyone else is vying for mediocrity, I guess, or something. I don't know what they're vying for, but they're fighting for something. But like, this is like, you could tell me Utah is going to finish with 85 points and I'll believe you. You could tell me Utah finishes with 103 points. And I'll be like, yeah, I could see it. Like, this is a wild team to predict. And yeah, I saw something on that, like, Corey Pronman thinks that Mikhail Sergachev is better than Adam Fox right now, which, please, I'm not doing this. You're not rage baiting me at 10:56 in the morning right now. Like, you're not doing this. This is not happening. I promise you. But like, with Utah, the thing about it is you can see, okay, Vejmelka takes a step. You could see maybe even Sergachev or Logan Cooley like really pop off. Maybe Sergachev scores 20 goals from the blue line, right? Like that, he can have a Mike Green type of season because he has that range of, oh, this is somebody that is one of the elite scorers in the league, or can, also can struggle at times as well, especially defensively. So like the range of possible outcomes for this team is so drastic that it's Utah is definitely one of those impossible to predict until it happens type of team, just because it's like there's a million different outcomes, and you just don't know what's really going to happen with them.
They're in a weird spot because we all kind of think they can do this, but they do actually have to go and do it. You need to actually go out there and win the games. Having potential is great, but eventually that bill comes due. And look, Utah is not exactly a cauldron of hockey intensity. Like, people are going to be willing to be patient. Armstrong's been there a while. He has time to kind of figure out where he wants to take this group, especially as they go from building to contender, or at least trying to be a contender. So he has time. But I will say, they will need to deliver at some point. They need to make the playoffs. They need to take a big swing at a restricted free agent or sign a big marquee free agent. Like, going out and spending money on Sergachev, on John Marino, those are good additions. They needed that. They needed an air of legitimacy. They needed solid, buildable pieces around them. They've got enough young guys that they have room for error. Not all of them are going to work out, but at least 1 or 2 of them should. You still have Doan's kid kicking around as well, who's in the mix, someone else worth considering. And there is enough talent here that you feel okay. Now, I think I would say Colorado is definitely better. Dallas is definitely better. I think Winnipeg, even without Nick Ehlers, is still better. Minnesota probably is better. Does Utah have enough talent to finish ahead of the Blues? Maybe. It's questionable. Possible. And that's really That's not a bad place to be. You know, when expectations are low, maybe you sneak up on people, you catch them by surprise. Utah hung around last year. They were in the mix till January, February, which is pretty good for a team that was left for dead and begotten by an owner who didn't really have an interest in owning them before the present ownership group.
Sure.
So,
well, you think about it too, like, you know, we'll get to Winnipeg in a minute, but, you know, Winnipeg isn't going to win 75 of the 82 games again like they did last year, right? So they're going to come back down to earth again. So there's a world in which 1 through 6 in the Central could be decided by 10 points, 12 points. Like, there's a world in which that happens. We almost saw it last season. Of course, Winnipeg, the outlier, won 56 games and they were steamrolling everybody and they had the 10-point advantage on Dallas, sure. But, you know, if Winnipeg takes a little bit of a step back and Utah takes a little bit of a step up, that gap is real close. It's real close. Like this Central Division isn't. If you're a fan of one of the 6 teams that's actively vying for a playoff spot in this division, this is not a fun time for you.
No. And speaking of teams vying for playoff spots, the Blues very much snuck up on people last year, took a massive leap in season by hiring Jim Montgomery. They cleared their over-under last year by 8 points. Their over-under's at 91.5, which is lower than I think I would peg them at myself. But the real question is, how sticky is your defense? We know year over year that defense and goaltending are more prone to volatility. That's why it's more reliable. It's more consistent. You'll get better results if you try and create a team centered around creating more offense than your opponents. Their defense is old. If you go and look through their guys, it's guys who have a lot of miles on the treads. The very weird trade for Logan Moliu, who may or may not be a useful NHLer, but I think my bigger question is why they traded away some of the Zach Bolduc. Like, they have a nice group. Like, Dylan Holloway was great last year. He almost had 30 goals. Jimmy Snuggerud, they took in the first round a couple years ago. He'll get a real chance to stick at the NHL level this year. You still got Robert Thomas, who outside chance, reasonable chance to make Team Canada for the Olympics next year. This is a really solid group. Other than Rob Thomas, I think they probably are a guy or two away from being able to push for one of those 3 playoff spots from the Central Division, but this is a solid team. They've got one of the best coaches in the NHL in Jim Montgomery. Binnington will probably be the goalie for Canada in the Olympics. There's enough here for them to get back to the playoffs. I don't really think that's out of the question. Make anything happen there? Granted, they played Winnipeg really well in the first round. Some of that was Connor Hellebuck not being good, but you got to score the goals. Even if the goalie's giving you easy ones, you still got to put them in the net.
Well, they were a miracle away from beating Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching the game with people, watching Game 7, and that was the most insane finish to a game I think I've ever seen in my life. Like, you do that in your backyard when you're playing backyard hockey. Like, it's Game 7, 3, the same thing where we feel basketball, of course, the same thing. Like, last shot, it goes in, the crowd goes wild. Like, that's the kind of dream scenario that the Jets found themselves in just to beat the Blues in the first round. It took a miracle and a half, a storybook, movie type of ending to just beat them and and then they have to win 3 more. Like, it was, and of course, granted, some of that was Connor Hellebuck doing, but also, like you said, the Blues still have to score the goals. They still have to play well in order to get to that opportunity. So the Logan Mailloux trade, like, hello? Like, what do we?
Bolduc was good last year.
I don't understand. I don't, and that I don't understand. Is Nick Bjugstad really going to be the better case scenario for Bolduc? Like, I don't know if that's true. And the blue line, I don't like Justin Falk because he's old at this point. But Logan Mailloux right now is penciled in as the 60 according to dailyfaceoff.com, which I'm looking at right now. But I don't know. Like, that trade is very strange to me. I agree with you, and they're gonna be in the playoffs, and I wonder if come January, like, let's say they are maybe 3rd in the division or 4th, and the Blues make a trade for another defenseman. I think that might be in the cards.
It's a very unremarkable group, their back end. Like, it's not terrible, but it's not impressive. It's not, I wouldn't say it's good. It's fine. And some of that helps. Montgomery, very well known for having his forwards playing good defense. Part of the reason they were so good down the stretch last year, the regular season, was that the forwards bought into playing a Jim Montgomery style. And yes, it makes it a little bit harder to score when everybody's so focused on defense, but they were smothering teams, and their power play was really good down the backstretch as well. And that's enough in the regular season. If you play elite team defense and you got timely goal scoring in the regular season, most nights that'll get you a win or keep you in a game long enough that you have a chance to win. And when we're talking about just basic risk assessment, that's not a bad place to be. If you're in most games, you got Robert Thomas, who's a fringe top 30, 40 player in the world. You got that's a pretty good foundation to just talk about sheer probability of winning most nights.
This is going to be a team that's, I think, is going to make the playoffs. But again, trying to predict 1 through 6 is, I mean, you probably have better luck figuring out the like Schrodinger's cat than you would figuring out the top 6 in the Central. I mean, this is going to be a mess. If you flip a coin, like I currently have St. Louis 4th. Like I think there's going to be teams that are just going to win more games, but St. Louis is going to be one of those teams that like doesn't win enough or like as many games as you think in the regular season, but they're a team that you don't want to face come the first round of the playoffs. Like they're going to be a dangerous team that, you know, Jim Montgomery is going to coach really well, and they're going to be a team that, you know, is not going to be a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination. So they're going to be a scary team. I do think they're going to trade for a defenseman before the deadline to kind of shore that up a little bit, see where that takes them. But they're a team that is not going to go away.
So after the St. Louis Blues, we come to the Minnesota Wild, another playoff team from last year. They cleared their over-under by 3. Their over-under this year is 94.5. The question, and it's a very big one, same thing we said last week about the Oilers and McDavid. Can you sign Kaprizov? Can you sign Filip Gustavsson? Without those two guys, I really struggle to see a path out of this mushy middle of playoff teams. They've got two prospects that they're very excited about. You've still got Zuccarello kicking, playing at a reasonably high level. Yeah. Eriksson Ek is still playing pretty good hockey. Ryan Hartman is a pretty solid player. You hope that Brock Faber bounces back from a rough second season in the NHL, probably just a bit of an adjustment. There's enough talent here for this team to be pretty good. This team should be a playoff team. They gave Vegas a pretty good first round, not Vegas, excuse me. They gave a pretty good first round series last year. And look, do I think the Minnesota Wild are a Stanley Cup caliber team? No, I don't. I think they can make the playoffs. I think they can play most teams pretty tight. They generally do play most teams well in the postseason. But again, like we were saying before about St. Louis, when you are oriented around your defense, around game control, it's hard to win every game 2-1 or 3-2. The amount of volatility baked into that makes it difficult to repeat over and over and over again. You know, they've only been out of the first round a handful of times in the history of this franchise. And some of that's just the nature of the variance within the NHL, but it's also the organizational philosophy. They've always been a defense first team. They have always been we will win with our 1 or 2 stars outplaying in those close situations. And look, Kaprizov is one of the 10 best players in the world. I have no reservation in saying that. You can make an argument. It's him or Kucherov is the best winger in the world. I have no qualms about saying that. Like I said at the intro, he could have won the Hart Trophy last year if he had stayed healthy. It's important he stays healthy. And obviously it's important for Minnesota that they lock him up for as long as they possibly can.
There's a lot of potential with Minnesota. And you take a look at their you know, the guys that they are very excited about, right? Like they played Boehm in the playoffs. He played 4 games and he's only, you know, that was his first like taste of NHL action. He's going to get better. Obviously he's going to play the entire season next year. And a guy like Danila Yurov, who I don't know much about, but like I read that the Wild, like that's their top prospect, and he's right now, according to Daily Faceoff, of course, is slated to play the third C spot, which, you know, could potentially be good for them. Minnesota is very high on him. They love this kid. So that's one of the biggest question marks that I have is, okay, well, how is he going to play? How is Boehm going to play in his first full season in the NHL? How, is Brock Faber going to bounce back? You know, there's a lot of, okay, if this goes well, the Wild are scary. Oh my God, they're scary. Like if Yurov comes out of the gate and he scores 35, 40 points, and Boehm looks really good and Faber bounces back. And this is a team that could, potentially win 48 games if things go well. And Gustavsson has a great season that by all accounts he should, because he's a good he's a great goalie, right? So and Kaprizov is still there and Zuccarello is still playing well and all these guys, there is a very reasonable argument that the Wild could finish top 3. They could finish top 2. I mean, there's a world in which they, if Winnipeg takes a step back, and we'll get to Dallas in a minute, Dallas's blue line is kind of not good. Colorado could have some issues here. There's a world in which you can convince me that Minnesota wins the Pacific, that wins the Central Division. I'm sorry. But you could also argue to me that, they are the 5th seed and they sneak in the playoffs by a point and then they lose in the first round again. That's another possible outcome for me. So just like Utah, just like St. Louis, it's they could be really good or they could be a team.
And that's the conundrum here. When the range of especially because the range of outcomes for a lot of these teams are all very similar to each other, they're inevitably going to cut each other off. They're inevitably going to step on each other's toes. Like we've been saying, there are 6 teams in this division that have a good chance to make the playoffs. There are only 5 spots open to them. So no matter what, one of these teams is not making the playoffs that we think has a good chance to. And that alone makes it an interesting conversation about what do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize ceiling the way Utah is? Do you want to prioritize floor the way that I would argue St. Louis is? And what do you think is a more likely outcome to get what you want? Do you think that you have built enough ceiling into your team to get where you want to go? If the Wild make a conference final, that buys Bill Guerin 5 more years as the general manager. If they miss the playoffs entirely, it wouldn't shock me if Bill Guerin got fired.
Yeah.
If he missed the playoffs outright and there were questions about Kaprizov and Gustavsson's contracts and they missed the playoffs, would not shock me at all. The Blues have a pipeline situation there where they have named their GM in waiting that, okay, maybe he gets fired and we speed that process up and we go to the GM in waiting a year earlier. So there's a lot to consider there. And as we move along through this conversation and we come up to Colorado, who we keep waiting for to have another really good playoff run. They were under their over-under by 2.5. They went 102. Their over-under this year is 105.5. They remodeled their goalie room on the fly last year, something I give them a lot of credit for being aggressive enough to do. A lot of teams are too patient, too willing to say, no, it'll sort itself out. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And they traded for 2 goalies in the span of a season. And it looks like they have salvaged something of Mackenzie Blackwood, who was left for dead in San Jose, to go and rot and effectively get kicked out of the league slowly but surely. This is a really good team. I don't know if it has the capacity to be great as it's currently constructed. Nathan MacKinnon's the 2nd best player in the world. He can only do so much by himself. I like Marty Necas. I know that's an unpopular opinion, being a Marty Necas defender, especially some of the attitude stuff about the way he's talked about contract extensions, his role on some of these teams. That's a really good hockey player when he's dialed in. He's huge. He skates really well. He's got pretty good puck skills. They locked in Brock Nelson, who didn't play amazing for them when he got there, but he's taking a pay cut. That should work. You reclamation project Victor Olofsson, who was fine for Vegas, and you bring in Brent Burns for another on the back end. There's enough talent here where they absolutely can win the Stanley Cup if McKinnon and Makar go crazy again. You got the Landeskog thing, which we'll see if he can play a full season or not, but he looked good in the playoffs in the limited action he did play. So I think Colorado, absolutely in the upper echelon. I would put them at the lower end of that contender tier with teams like Vegas. I do think they are a Stanley Cup contender, but I think they're closer to the bottom of that grouping than they are the top. We've seen it for 2.5, 3 years now where the regular season is largely academic. They win enough games. And look, they get credit for being resolved last year. They did not play well the first 3 months of the year. They were really struggling through December, and they turned it around. They salvaged their season. They pulled off the Rantanen trade. They got Necas. They got Jack Drury. They went in heavy at the deadline in trading for Brock Nelson. They gave up a really good prospect to get Brock Nelson, and they should be right there. And look, no matter what, someone is getting the short end of the stick here, because you're going to play Dallas, Colorado, or Minnesota in the first round, all of whom are capable of winning the division and being the higher seed and not in the matchup. Colorado, arguably, until Rantanen went nuclear, they were winning that game 2-0 with 11 minutes to go in a game 7. And then Rantanen went crazy, and that swung the series and lost them the series.
Spite is a powerful drug.
Oh, it is. Hate moves you. You know, the Hound in Game of Thrones, he was cooking when they asked him what keeps you going, and he said hate. It is a powerful motivator. And look, I think Colorado, if you give them a mulligan, they probably suck it up and make the Rantanen thing work as opposed to doing what they ultimately ended up doing last year, especially because of a lot of the stuff Rantanen has said since about how he felt that it was always going to get done, and he was caught completely off guard by the fact they actually did trade him. But this is a team that, if everything goes right, can win the Stanley Cup, no hesitation. But you saw the low end of this. Their bottom 6 is kind of leaky. Their defense beyond their first pair is not great. Mackenzie Blackwood has been in the NHL for 6 years. He has 2 good seasons in those 6 years.
Sure.
I can very easily make the argument for the negative outcome here, where Blackwood regresses to a below average goalie beyond Makar and Taves. They can split them up and mitigate some of it, but their defense is not great. Their bottom 6 is not great. And that's really been the knock on them since they won the Stanley Cup. They've lost a lot of the depth over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's been the difference. You know, the year they won the Stanley Cup, Kadri had like 90 points as a second line center, which is inconceivable in today's NHL, that you have that much offense to go around. But that's just how good that team was when they won the Stanley Cup.
My mentions and my DMs last year were very interesting because if you remember last year, I said that they'd missed the playoffs. And if they didn't essentially change the entire team, they would have.
Yeah.
And like it's very interesting because, you know, early on I got DMs and messages saying, oh, take your victory lap and do all these things. And I'm like, no, because season's not over. And then I got DMs once the Avs traded everybody and then started winning games being like, oh, but you said that they would miss the playoffs. Oh, like, where are you now? I'm like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Because I was talking about a completely different roster at that point.
Changing your whole goalie room in season is something basically unprecedented.
Right, exactly. Like that, it doesn't happen. So this is, again, a lot of credit goes to Colorado for at least trying to fix what is very obviously broken. And to their credit, it worked. Like they got to 100 points, and I think they'll be around that again this year. But, you know, you go to the playoffs and, yeah, they're going to add somebody. Sure, they're going to, you know, probably bolster the blue line, what have you. But is this team deep enough to scare Minnesota, to scare Dallas, to scare Winnipeg? And, even Winnipeg, they lost Nick Ehlers and they didn't replace him. So, like, we'll talk about Winnipeg in a second. But, like, even they took a step back, right? So there's still going to be a playoff team. You know, like you said, the regular season to them is relatively academic. They're going to be just fine, but it's after that you have to start thinking and start worrying a little bit if you're an Avs fan of, okay, well, yeah, they're here, they're in the playoffs, and, you know, it's not a total disaster, but is this really the best team here? And that's what you have to ask yourself. Of course, come March, the team could once again have 8 new players on the roster, and all this is for nothing because Colorado likes to make me look like a silly little fool. But this is another team again. Like I feel like I've said this for most of these teams so far. It's like they could be really good, or like you said, Mackenzie Blackwood could be a goalie.
He turns back into a pumpkin.
Yeah. And suddenly the Avs have to do the same thing again of trading for more new goalies and more new faces just to patch up the holes on the ship. It's like it's like in the scene from, I think it's Indiana Jones or whatever. Maybe it's Jurassic, I can't remember. But like trying to duct tape the massive hole in the rock. It's like that's kind of what they did last year, and it worked to their credit. But can they do it again if it happens again? I don't know.
So I'm looking at it right now. Mackenzie Blackwood, for his career, he's been a 918, 915, 902, 892, 893, 899, 912. He's got 2 really good seasons in there, those first 2 years in New Jersey. He had 4 terrible ones where he was basically almost out of the league. And then he had a 2.33 in 36 starts for the Avs last year. it's not implausible he regresses back to being close to an average or slightly above average goalie, and that's a fundamentally different calculus. And we know goaltending is very fickle. It is not very consistent, especially when it comes to guys like this, where we've seen plenty of goalies put together 1 or 2 good seasons, and then, okay, you start to have a little confidence. He got a nice mid-tier extension, 5x5, 5x6, whatever it was. Okay. I wouldn't be shocked if he sucked again. That's not out of the question at all. And that's just the nature of goaltending. And, we're talking about the bottom 6 and the defense. That has a trickle-down effect on the goaltending. If the bottom 6 isn't great, if the defense beyond Makar and Taves isn't great, what are you going to do when Blackwood has to do more? And that's really that I think for me is the big question about the Avalanche is, what are you going to get in net? Because you saw Georgiev give them reasonable goaltending the previous 2 seasons. Georgiev made the All-Star game 2 years ago, how many wins he had behind this defense. So the Avalanche don't ask their goalies to do a lot. So the fact that Georgiev was so bad last year, they felt the need to make that move in season is just really a testament to how bad those first 2 months were, because the Avs have gotten by with slightly above average goaltending for a lot of this contender window.
Yeah, well, Georgiev making that All-Star, by the way,
it was purely about wins.
It was. And that's one of the caveats to all that is, like, if Georgiev played well, like, I would have no issues with that, but you making the playoffs, you're making the All-Star game simply because your team played well and not necessarily because you played well. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I mean, the Avalanche, like we said, like, they could win 50 games and win the Central, or Blackwood could be real bad. Colorado might need to put more Band-Aids on this team again and run it back, but not in the Rangers way of running it back of like, everything is, the sky is falling. Okay, well, we need to boot up franchise mode. See, we're learning. Thank you for the applause. And rebuild it that way. Like, they did that last year. It worked. If they need to do it again, we'll see if they could go 2 for 2.
Next up, the second place team in the Central Division last year, team that went to the Western Conference Final and lost to the Oilers for the second straight year, the team that acquired Mikko Rantanen midseason, the team that has a Jason Robertson extension to resolve, a team that still has real question marks about the right side of their defense. That, of course, is the Dallas Stars. This is a team that we have effectively been waiting for 4 years now to break through and win the Stanley Cup. They have enough talent. They have had some really tough draws in the playoffs, whether it be Vegas, whether it be Edmonton, whether it be Colorado. Eventually, though, if you don't capitalize, if you don't break through, you become the Sharks of the last decade. You become the Rangers of the last decade.
Yep.
The Stars have more than enough talent to win the Stanley Cup, especially now with Rantanen. I feel very strongly that this is one of the best groups in the NHL. This is Jamie Benn's last dance. This is probably Tyler Sagan's last dance. Matt Duchene, after 2 straight years of really good production on a cheap deal, asked for more money. They are going to be in a very difficult spot come next summer. And look, as we've said a lot over the years, especially about the Capitals, once you win the Stanley Cup, it doesn't matter. If Dallas wins the Cup this year and next year their roster takes a real step back because all their old guys retire or move on for other landing spots, okay, you won the Stanley Cup. And yeah, you might have to reload for a year or 2, but you'll still have Ottinger, you'll have Rantanen, you'll have Hintz, you got Heiskanen and Thomas Harley, who really emerged as a top 5-10 defenseman in the world last year. This team has all of the pieces. The way they handled firing Pete DeBoer was a little bit weird at the end of the season. Granted, Pete DeBoer, what he said about Ottinger was a little weird at the end of the season as well. First-time head coach, we'll see how that bears out if it takes a little while for them to get it together. But this team has the guys. It's simply a matter of, can they put it together?
They have it. I mean, I very much question, obviously, you have Miro Heiskanen on the right side, but then after that, you have Ilya Lyubushkin and Nils Lundqvist as your second and third right pairing defensemen, which I have a lot of questions about, and that's probably something that Jim Nill will take a look at improving in season.
3 years in a row now, they've traded for a right-handed defenseman at the deadline. So,
well, it would be nice if they traded for a good one, because they haven't. They traded for like
Dumba
Cody
last
Ceci
year.
And all just guys
Matt Dumba. Don't forget Matt Dumba.
Matt Dumba. Yeah, well, who could forget Matt Dumba, of course. But if you, it's one that There's 2 steps in the process of 1, identifying that you have a problem, and 2, addressing the problem correctly. At least
the Dallas Stars are halfway there. They've established that, that right side is a problem. We should probably do something about that. The problem is that they have gone about fixing it in the worst possible way by acquiring players that cannot play at the caliber that they need them to play. And they've done it somehow multiple years in a row. Like, this is insane. Eventually, they will get this sorted out, right? Surely, everybody say it with me, surely they can fix this, right? But who knows? They've done this so many times that I'm starting to lose faith in them ever figuring out that, hey, good players play on the right side, and maybe you should get somebody that could play well. But who am I to say? I'm not a general manager in the NHL, so what do I know? But besides that glaring issue aside, this team is deep. Like, this team is really deep. They have, Jamie Benn is not the player that he once was, but you have an older Jamie Benn on the third line. It's a pretty good bottom nine scorer. He's still somebody that, he's not going to score 1 million points anymore, but he's definitely going to still contribute at a relatively high value, especially playing against other teams' third lines. Whom is stopping Jamie Benn, even if, he's not 28 anymore, 25 anymore, from getting to the net, from getting to his spots, from still contributing at a high clip. There's not a whole lot of third lines in the league that could say to themselves, we have a Jamie Benn-esque type player on that line. Like, they don't. So the Stars are very deep in that regard. Obviously Roope Hintz, Jason Robinson, and Heiskanen and Rantanen, like they're still.
It's as good a 1 through 7 as there is in the whole league.
And with Jake Ottinger in goal, Pete DeBoer's comments aside, which makes, I don't know why he felt the need to say that. It felt very strange at the time. Obviously, then he immediately got shown the door, which was, I think, the right thing to do. But the Stars are going to be another top team here. Again, you could say they're going to be first or second or third. Like, there's some amalgamation of points that makes sense for everybody involved that no one's going to get mad at. So, but they're going to be a playoff team. It's a matter of, okay, are they going to do it this time? Are they going to do it this year? Or are they just going to make a whole lot of noise and then fall in the second round again, or the conference finals or whatever? Like, they need to do more now. Like, this is their time. Can you make it to a cup final at least? Like, at least get to the pinnacle. This is a lot of
a Stanley Cup final with Anton Khudobin as the goalie, and that was a weird year. That was a very weird year, and that was their best chance, which is kind of crazy, all things considered.
They're doing a lot of what the Sharks did and what the Rangers did, even though the Rangers didn't make the Cup final in 2014, and the Rangers, by all accounts, had more success because they made it to multiple conference finals and et cetera in that 2010s window. But the Stars are another one of those teams where they do really well in the regular season. They're scary on paper. They do a lot of solid decisions, and they're really at least trying to round out the roster. And then come playoff time, they just keep falling short. And it's at this point, it's okay. Well, Dallas, either you show it to me that you got it, or you're going to show me that you don't. And there's just no in between anymore.
Yeah, that brings us to Winnipeg, a team who had the year of its life last year. Everything went right for them. Hellebuck won MVP and the Vezina in the same season. First time someone's done that since Carey Price last decade. This is a team that has young guys that I am really optimistic about. I like Cole Perfetti a lot. I am quite optimistic about Brad Lambert should he get the opportunity to stick this time around. The Jets have been very slow playing about their young guys over the last handful of seasons because they've been a serious contender for a lot of the last few years, and they don't want to give guys an opportunity to learn, to figure it out. I think inevitably, anytime you win a President's Trophy, you're probably going to regress the following year. Yeah. I think they are still good enough to make the playoffs. I don't think of them as a high-end Stanley Cup contender. I would put them lower. I put them closer to where I have Minnesota than where I have Colorado and Dallas. But I think this team is more than good enough to make the playoffs. I think if you ever get Hellebuck's between the ears squared away in the playoffs, you're a scary group. You know, he was good in the Four Nations for Team USA. He wasn't a problem there. I really just struggle to see a world where they're going to beat, you know, 2 out of Vegas, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, Edmonton. The West is a knife fight. And it's not that Winnipeg is bad. It's just that these other teams are better than them. And that's a really tough place to be because you're not going to close that gap on these teams all that easily just because of the nature of it. Like Winnipeg's best forward is Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele's 33 and very easily could start to age-related decline. Kyle Connor is still very good, but there are questions about his defense, about his two-way game and how that translates in those high-stakes, high-leverage environments. Mike Sullivan, of course, played Chris Kreider with like one hand over Kyle Connor in a do-or-die game. So you put that in the back of your mind. This is a good hockey team. I don't think it'll be a great one. I expect Hellebuck to have a really good regular season again. I'd like to shout out Dylan Sandberg, one of the great minutes eaters in our league, somebody who, as one of my friends calls it, treads water at a really high level where, yeah, he's in his own zone the entire time, but he's not drowning. His head's not under the water. He's kicking and treading water at a really high level and does it in a way that Jacob Slavin doesn't. And I know I get a lot of shit anytime I talk about Jacob Slavin being a little overrated. He's in his own zone a lot. And it's a lot easier to play defense when you're not just eating block shots over and over again. Like he wins a lot of loose pucks, but at the same time, he turns over a lot of pucks because he's in those situations so often. Sandberg, Forsling, those are the types of defense-first defensemen you need in today's NHL. I think the Jets have more than enough to be a solid team. I think the high-end range of outcomes, I wouldn't be shocked if they made a second round or even a conference final. Unlikely, but it's doable.
Yeah, well, the question that you have to ask yourself is who's going to replace Nick Ehlers' production? Like, it's the same question that we are asking the Rangers now that they've traded away Chris Kreider, but didn't replace Chris Kreider. Okay, well, Nick Ehlers walked. You didn't get anything in return for him, and you didn't sign anyone that is going to replace.
Oh, we didn't talk about Jonathan Toews real quick.
Yeah, he's he's got to play hockey, I think.
But the thing is, and this is important. Are the Jets going to be honest about this? Because there is a world where the Jets do with Toews what they've done with Logan Stanley for the last 4 years, where he is actively bad, but because of their preconceived notion about his value, they refuse to demote him from the lineup or in the lineup. You know, if Toews is the third or fourth line center, he can't kill you that bad, but they have him listed as the second line center right now.
Yeah, they do.
They think Jonathan Toews, who hasn't played professional hockey in 2 years, is capable of being a minutes-eating second-line center and getting difficult matchups. They're going to be very disappointed, even if he's entirely resolved the physical issues. 2 years away from a professional sport is a lifetime. And you hope for the sake of, you know, the guy that he doesn't get hurt, nothing bad happens. But at the same time, the Jets need to make the playoffs. The Jets have obligations to fulfill. And if we're letting Jonathan Toews do fantasy camp the same way the Rangers did with Patrick Kane, why are we not prioritizing winning hockey games? Why are we prioritizing, well, he's from here. It's so cool. He's on the team. That's great. This is the National Hockey League. We're here to win games, not to tell stories.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Jonathan Toews plays, and it's very interesting to see how Winnipeg reacts if he doesn't play well.
Yeah,
because the story is great. You know, all the homecomings and all the content videos and the articles. It's great. It's a great story, and you know, like it's definitely one that feels good all the way around. He goes home to Winnipeg, gets to play for his hometown, whatever. Like that's all awesome. Objectively, that's great. Come puck drop, can he play? Can he play well? Can he play second line center well? Can he play third line center well? Can he play fourth line center well? And if the answer to all those three questions is no, Winnipeg is going to do that's a massive problem, because you're telling me that Vladimir Nemestikov is going to be your second line
He
center?
wasn't bad at that last year. To be fair, Nemestikov was pretty good for them as a two. And look, overachieving, good team, easy environment, playing with Nick Ehlers. Like
And I like Nebestikov. I'm not here to poo-poo Vlad Nebestikov, but what I am saying is that you probably want someone else to play your second line center spot, which currently Daily Faceoff has Jonathan Davis playing, which is a massive gamble. A massive gamble. You don't know what Jonathan Davis looks like playing professional hockey. He hasn't done it in 2 years, like you said, which is a million years in NHL terms or in pro sports terms in general. You're just going to pencil him in there and just call it a day. It feels very flimsy. That's the word that I was looking for. It feels like a deck of cards where it looks strong and you might super glue the cards together and all that, but you know what? Like, could still fall at any moment.
Okay, Andrew, give me your 1 through 8.
Okay. So I have Chicago at 8. It'd be really funny if I said Chicago 1, wouldn't it? And then I have Nashville at 7, and then 1 through 6. I mean, this is nearly impossible. I guess I'll put Utah at 6. I have more questions about them than I do anybody else. I'll put Minnesota at 5 for the time being. I mean, you asked me in about 6 minutes, I could change my answer, but I have Minnesota there. I have St. Louis at 4. I have Winnipeg at 3. I have Dallas at 2, and I have Colorado at 1, just by virtue of McKinnon, and he's going to score 1 million points. And I think like Colorado could do this, or, Colorado could finish in Minnesota spot for all I know. Like this is going to be a fight and a half.
Oh yeah. Like I said in the middle of the episode, there are only 5 possible playoff spots. There are 6 teams here who expect to make the playoffs. Yeah. You could even delude yourself into saying Nashville thinks they should make.
Well, they can think whatever they want, but reality check here for a second.
Yes, of course. And real quick for me, I have Chicago 8th. I have Nashville 7th. I have Utah 6th. I have St. Louis 5th. I have Winnipeg 4th. I have Minnesota 3rd, Colorado 2nd, Dallas 1st. I think Winnipeg and St. Louis make the playoffs. I think Minnesota has a little more upside than St. Louis and Winnipeg do. It's the only reason I have them ahead. I definitely have a lot of questions about the Minnesota young guys, but I think if at least one of them pops, the possibility for a really good season is sitting there. That'll do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Next week, we'll be back with the Atlantic, where the Panthers are probably going to win again and make us all depressed. We'll see you guys real soon.
Later.